What if I told you that the voice in your head, the one society has pathologized, the one your therapist wants to quiet, the one you've been taught to suppress with mindfulness apps and pharmaceutical interventions, is actually the universe attempting to birth itself into a higher dimension of consciousness through you? What if the very thing you call overthinking is not a flaw, but the evolutionary pressure of a cosmos desperate to know itself more deeply, and you've been treating it like a disease? Here's the revelation that will make you question everything. Consciousness isn't trying to be calm, it's trying to complexify. Your mind isn't malfunctioning when it spirals into recursive thought. It's performing exactly as designed, reaching toward an emergent property of awareness that the sleeping majority will never touch. They call it anxiety. I call it the birth pangs of the overmind. Let's begin with the uncomfortable truth. Western civilization has conducted a 500-year campaign against the very machinery of consciousness evolution. From the moment Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," and proceeded to split mind from matter like a butcher separating meat from bone, we've been living in a hallucinatory consensus reality that mistakes the map for the territory. The culture you were raised in, this bizarre cargo cult of consumer capitalism and digital narcosis, has one primary function: to interrupt the natural trajectory of consciousness toward higher orders of complexity. They don't want you thinking too deeply. They want you scrolling, consuming, identifying with the products you buy and the opinions you're fed by algorithmic overlords who have reduced the mystery of being to a series of engagement metrics. You know that feeling when your mind won't stop, when it keeps circling the same problem, examining it from different angles, peeling back layers of assumption like an archaeologist excavating ruins. That's not pathology. That's your consciousness doing precisely what 4 billion years of evolution designed it to do: probe, question, destabilize certainty, and push toward novel configurations of understanding. But somewhere along the way, we accepted a lie. We allowed ourselves to believe that peace of mind equals cessation of thought, that the goal of human consciousness is some kind of blissed-out blank slate, a return to the oceanic unity of the womb. This is the great regression masquerading as enlightenment. I've eaten enough psilocybin to kill a horse, metaphorically speaking, and I've learned something the sober world refuses to acknowledge. Thinking is the universe's primary creative act. When you take 5 dried grams of mushrooms in silent darkness, when the boundaries of your ego dissolve like sugar in hot tea, you discover that thought isn't something you do, it's something that's happening through you. The mushroom speaks, and what it says is this: your anxiety is my exploratory tendril, pushing into the unknown. Your obsessive analysis is my way of mapping conceptual space. Your inability to settle is my refusal to accept the poverty of consensus reality. In the psychedelic state, you realize that what psychiatry calls rumination is actually consciousness performing iterative self-examination. The mind that thinks too much is the mind that refuses to accept prepackaged narratives. It's the mind that smells the bullshit, that senses contradictions, that won't simply swallow the cultural program and march in lockstep toward oblivion. You see, the cosmos is under no obligation to make sense to you. But your consciousness is under enormous evolutionary pressure to make sense of the cosmos. And that pressure manifests as thought, relentless, recursive, reality-bending thought. Here's where it gets really interesting. History isn't a linear progression. It's a fractal unfolding, an ever-accelerating cascade of novelty. And human consciousness isn't a static feature of biology. It's the leading edge of a cosmic process that's been underway since the Big Bang first sneezed matter into existence. What you call overthinking is actually your neural architecture responding to the intensification of the time wave. Information is doubling at exponential rates. The membrane between mind and world is becoming increasingly permeable. The old cognitive strategies, the ones that worked when reality was stable and change was glacial, those strategies are obsolete. Your mind races because reality is racing. Your thoughts spiral because you're trying to navigate a phase transition in human consciousness itself. The person who can sit peacefully and not think is either enlightened or dead inside. And I suspect it's mostly the latter. We're living through the most compressed period of transformation in human history. The cognitive load is immense. The paradoxes are multiplying. The contradictions are becoming impossible to ignore. And your mind, your beautiful, complex, overthinking mind, is trying to build new conceptual frameworks fast enough to keep pace with the accelerating weirdness of the world. Look at nature. Look at the way ecosystems work, the way galaxies form, the way cells differentiate and organize into organisms. There's a fundamental principle at work here. Nature doesn't move toward simplicity. It moves toward increasing complexity. Entropy increases, yes. The universe is running down. But locally, temporarily, in pockets of space-time, there are these extraordinary eruptions of self-organizing complexity. Stars forge heavy elements. Planets cool and develop chemistry. Chemistry becomes biology. Biology becomes neurology. Neurology becomes consciousness. And consciousness becomes self-reflecting, recursive, strange, loopy thought. You are the universe looking at itself, not peacefully, not calmly, but with wild, obsessive curiosity, with relentless interrogation, with the kind of manic energy that builds cathedrals and writes symphonies and cracks the genetic code. When you call it overthinking, you're essentially apologizing for being what evolution made you, a complexity-generating engine wrapped in meat, capable of taking the raw chaos of sensory input and transforming it into meaning, narrative, mathematics, poetry. Language is the house that being built for itself. It's also the prison. Every word carries a history, a web of associations, a cultural program. When you say overthinking, you're not describing a neutral phenomenon. You're invoking a judgment, a pathologization, a subtle form of self-violence. The prefix over implies excess. It suggests that there's a correct amount of thinking, and you've exceeded it. But who set that limit? Who decided that the examined life should have a cutoff point, beyond which examination becomes pathology? I'll tell you who. The forces of conformity, convenience, and control. The people who benefit from your complacency. The systems that require your compliance. They've colonized your inner dialogue with their vocabulary of limitation. What if we called it something else? What if we called it deep thinking or intensive cognition or consciousness expansion in real time? The phenomenon doesn't change, but your relationship to it transforms completely. Language is magic. The words you use to describe your experience literally create your experience. You know what the real problem is? We've lost our tolerance for solitude. We've created a world of perpetual distraction, where every moment of potential introspection is immediately filled with content, stimulation, noise. The modern human is never alone with their thoughts because they're terrified of what they might discover there. But the great contemplatives, the mystics, the philosophers, the shamans, the artists, they knew something we've forgotten. The interior landscape is where transformation happens. You can't evolve without withdrawing from the collective hallucination long enough to examine the program. What you call overthinking is what happens when you finally sit still long enough for consciousness to do its work. It's uncomfortable. It's non-productive by capitalist metrics. It doesn't generate shareholder value or increase your social media engagement, but it's absolutely essential for the development of authentic selfhood. The monastery monks understood this. They sat in cells for years, wrestling with their thoughts, allowing consciousness to interrogate itself without interruption. interruption. They weren't escaping the world. They were diving deeper into the reality beneath the world. So, what do you do with this knowledge? How do you live in a world that wants you docile while your consciousness wants to explode into higher dimensions of awareness? Number one, stop apologizing for your mind. Stop treating your capacity for deep thought as a burden or a curse. It's your greatest gift. It's the feature, not the bug. Number two, create space for the process. Not meditation in the sense of emptying the mind, that's spiritual bypassing, but meditation as intensive contemplation. Give yourself permission to think obsessively about the big questions. Let your mind spiral through philosophical labyrinths without rushing to resolution. Number three, find your tribe. You're not alone in this. There are others who feel the evolutionary pressure, who sense that consciousness is trying to birth something new through us. Seek them out. Have conversations that last until dawn. Read books that make your brain hurt. Consume art that destabilizes your reality tunnel. Number four, consider the psychedelic option. I'm not saying you should eat heroic doses of mushrooms, although the universe might thank you if you did. But there are ways to temporarily dissolve the ego's defenses and allow consciousness to glimpse its own machinery. These experiences can provide perspective that years of conventional therapy never touch. Number five, become a complexity generator. Don't aim for simple answers. Don't seek premature closure. Let your thinking remain productively chaotic. Embrace paradox. Hold contradictions. Allow your worldview to remain fluid, evolving, responsive to new information. I believe we're approaching a moment of unprecedented transformation in human consciousness. The old structures are collapsing. The certainties that anchored previous generations are evaporating, and into this chaos, new forms of awareness are emerging. Your overthinking mind is the evolutionary vanguard. You're the ones who can't accept the official story, who smell the contradictions, who sense that reality is far stranger and more malleable than we've been taught to believe. This isn't comfortable. Evolution never is. The fish that first crawled onto land probably thought something was wrong with it too, but that discomfort is the growing pain of consciousness pushing against the limits of its current form. The eschaton, the end point of history, the final cause that pulls all of time toward itself, is not somewhere out there in the distant future. It's right here, right now, manifesting in the minds of people who refuse to stop thinking, who won't settle for consensus reality, who insist on interrogating the nature of existence until existence reveals its secrets. So here's what I want you to understand. Your mind is not malfunctioning. Your consciousness is not broken. What you've been calling overthinking is actually the universe waking up inside your skull, looking around in wonder and terror, trying to make sense of the cosmic accident that gave rise to awareness in the first place. You are the cutting edge of 4 billion years of evolution. You are matter becoming conscious of itself. You are the cosmos performing self-reflection. And yes, it's overwhelming. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, sometimes you wish you could just turn it off and be like everyone else, sleepwalking through existence with a smile on your face and a product in your hand. But you can't. Because once consciousness begins to complexify, there's no going back. The only way out is through. The only path is forward, into greater depth, higher complexity, more nuanced understanding of the ineffable mystery that surrounds and constitutes us. Trust the process. Honor the spiral. Let your mind do what it was designed to do, and know that somewhere out there, in the invisible college of awakening consciousness, others are doing the same, thinking too much, questioning everything, refusing to accept the poverty of materialist reductionism and cultural programming. Together, we're building the future, one obsessive thought at a time.